Hello, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Roman. I am a team member from Impact 24 PR, and welcome to our post-production workshop. Yeah. We are so excited to be here at LA Comic Con with our first ever workshop where we'll give you an inside look at one of the stages of filmmaking, post-production. Today, we're going to step into a simulated post-production meeting with some of the most talented professionals in the industry who each bring a unique perspective to the creative process. They'll be sharing clips from their work to give us a behind-the-scenes look at how they shape and refine the final product while collaborating with other departments. With that being said, let's get ready to learn from the experts themselves about how every decision in the post-production process helps bring a project to life. Acting as our post-production meeting leader, please welcome co-executive producer and co-editor of Only Murders in the Building, Shelly Westerman. Please welcome editor of Only Murders in the Building,
Payton, Koch.
Please welcome composer of The Silent Planet, Darren Fung. And last but not least, please welcome supervising sound editor and mixer of Tony Hawk Until the Wheels Fall Off, Chalfant. Now, Shelly, I'll let you take it away from here.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Thanks for the introduction. We're excited to be here today to kind of talk about the creative magic, or as we would call all the hard work, that happens in post-production, where everything comes together. By the end of today's session, we are hoping that you'll have a whole new appreciation for the artistry of post-production and learn how it is crucial to the storytelling process. So let's go right in with the editing clip.
Charles Hayden Savage to the stage for the big quick triplets. Gonna help us all.
I really have to do the whole thing.
Yes, all 2 minutes, 46 seconds. No white room, no fake migraine, one verse in.
Aye.
Look at here. Just watch. Just watch.
Three little babes in their bassinets, angelic little triplets or triple threats. They might have fooled the others, but they won't fool me. It's time to give these teething, seething free the third degree. Which of the Pickwick triplets did it? Who of the crew would commit this crime? My little brat, make 'em Bonnie goes flat.
It's a story pretty gory for a nursery rhyme.
Which of the Pickwick triplets did it? Which of the spawn had the brawn to kill? Will a baby get tried for matricide? Coochie. Time for you or you to admit it. So quick as a whip, got a pick which Pickwick triplet did it. Penelope in pink sure is making quite a stink. Is she trying to throw me off the scent? Though she bats her little eyes, is she a killer in disguise?
With a diaper full of criminal intent.
Breeding Patrick is pernicious, with an appetite so vicious, he would bite the hand that feeds him with a sneer. But could that rotten tot be behind this evil plot? Baby stepping towards a murderous career. Pouty little Paco's looking coy, but he's a bad, bad boy. Could Paco's passion prove apocalyptic? With his passy and his rattle, did this Pisher go to battle, proving he's the peppermints this Pickwick triplet? In this picaresque puzzle of the Pickwick pack, will a lighthouse shed some light on which Kid gave old Ma the whack? There's an infant to indict. I'll book this little crook tonight. But which of the Pickwick triplets did it? Who of the crew would commit this crime? Which little brat made Mommy go splat? Which favorite Sid will be doing hard time? Which of the Pickwick triplets did it? Which little putz had the guts to kill? Like a forensic pediatrician, I'll complete this inquisition. I will name the neonatal from the cradle that proved fatal. I will find the perpetrator who did murder to their mater.
do dinner tonight. The cops said they need to talk to me.
Why? What about?
It can't be good.
Or coochie coochie coo. What if none of it is true?
Has my inspection been too cursory? Should I look outside this nursery? What if none of the Pickwick triplets did it? Who'd have had a menacing motive and hit it? Who?
Well, I pick you.
Payton, can you talk about some of the evolution of that scene, kind of how it came to be? It was scripted with some of the split screens noted, but talk to us about how you put that together.
Sure. Yeah, so as Shelly said, the sequence was scripted. When we got the script, it was Charles going in to perform the whole number, and then in the script said split screen starts, and we're like, oh, okay, wonderful. But so what was amazing is that our directors, Bob Pulcini and Sherry Springer Berman, had worked with Shelly in the past, and so we were able to sort of have a relationship in the pre-production aspect. So going in, we were able to have a conversation about how we were going to attack this, and we went in and made a sort of mapped out template sequence with all the different frames with the names of the characters, so that we were able to sort of track where they were going and what stories we were wanting to show on screen and tell at the same time. And we wouldn't have been able to make it without our amazing assistant, Deanna, who's here. So thank you, Deanna, for all of that. But it really allowed us to go into the shooting of the sequence with a real plan. And so, we went in, we had the title cards, and then as they were shooting the different scenes, we would bring it into the Avid and we would place, that scene in the box, and it would constantly evolve and change as all the pieces were coming in, but it allowed us to sort of have a great foundation in building it.
So prior to that, Steve had already gone and recorded the song. So we had a base to work from because he had done a polished version of that song. But talk about what really happens in the end.
Yeah, so what was amazing with doing the musical performance of this song was all of the actors had pre-records of the numbers that were in the show. And so, like Shelly just said, we had sort of a base as to where it was going to go. So we had the pre-record song dropped into the tracks, and then we're cutting Steve's live performing on top of it, and he did perform live every time. They sort of broke the song into sections, so he would do one chunk, a few takes, and then move on to the next chunk. And so in the finishing process, when we got into with our mixers, they would work with our music team, and every single syllable was a cut from between the pre-record and then him performing live, and then they would bring him in for ADR sessions afterwards to re-record breaths and everything. So they made it so diegetic and wanted it to sound, as real as possible, because this wasn't a musical where it's, you're breaking out in the song and all the sound fades away. It was supposed to feel like you were in the room with them, and so we did everything that we could to have it be as real, authentic. And when we went in and heard the mix for the first time, we were blown away of how full and just perfect it sounded. He was amazing, and watching Steve perform that was just unbelievable.
Well, and it was interesting as editors because we thought we had done a great job with the song recording and his live recording, and when we turned it over to the music department, they said, oh, no. We're like, what do you mean? We thought we did a great job. So they really perfected it.
Yeah.
But also talk a little bit about the choices that we made with the title cards and mapping out the song were given over to production before they shot. So they had a map of how to frame the shot.
Right. It was kind of like all laid out for them, so they knew when we were going to split into Mabel and Howard, where they're putting all the pieces together. We knew they were going to enter from the right side of frames because we had the frame coming this way. So it just allowed us to, as editors, normally we're very only involved in post, right? So with a sequence like this, it was fun for us to sort of be able to be a part of the pre and production. And that we're influencing it. Normally it's like we get the footage and we have to work with it and make something out of it. But it was fun for us to sort of have that, power in the sequence. It was great. It was a cool experience for us.
Yeah. And there were also modifications that we had to learn how to make there's the little break in the song where Meryl Streep's character is talking to her son's character, and so that the song had to stop, and we had to get some additional music recorded to kind of layer into that until we went back into the song. So it was kind of an extra complication, but it was for storytelling purposes. At that point, we couldn't be in the song while we needed this important story point of the mother and son talking.
Yeah, and that kind of happened a few times throughout the season with the musical numbers, and it was so great working with our music team because they had all of the elements to just either loop a chorus or you know, make new strings, and they tied everything together so beautifully. It was amazing to watch them work.
And then, do you remember, because I don't remember, if there were changes or tweaks made to it after we presented the cut to the producers?
Well,
There's talk about the path that our cuts go through.
Yeah, so normally, you know, we'll have our editors cut and it'll go to the directors and, you know, we'll work with them. And like I was saying earlier, we had a relationship with them. So, you know, we were already sort of trusted each other in our relationship with our showrunner, John Hoffman. He also really trusts our process. And so the cuts usually come in a little longer, you know, maybe around the 45-minute mark, but we try to get to 35 minutes. So he just said, you know, do your thing. You guys make it as tight and clean as possible. And so we got some extra days with the directors and worked really, really hard. And then when we turned it into the producers, they were just so floored by it, and they didn't really have notes. So, and like, that's a very shocking thing. Normally it's like you tear it apart and then everyone's coming in and there's all the cooks in the kitchen, but they were so pleased with it, which was shocking for us and scary because you're normally like, wait, this is it? Like, don't you want to go back? Let's look at stuff. We could try. There's so infinite possibilities of where, you know, a scene could land. And so for it to have been, you know, hit out of the park like that, it was an amazing thing.
Yeah, there's normally a pretty lengthy process that we go through with our initial cuts, and then, as Payton said, going through with the director's cut, and their influence and notes and choices might be different from yours. And then we present that to the producers, who then have a whole round of notes. Then we will keep editing and editing to satisfy those notes. And then we submit it to the studio and get their feedback. So that's another round of notes. Before we get to what we call locked picture, where that's the episode as it's going to air, and at that point, that's when sound and music start getting involved in it. So it's a lengthy process, but a lot of times in television, that's expedited because of the schedule. So it could be anywhere from a few days to a week to months. Yeah. Depends on the show. Well, was there anything else you wanted to add about the cut or, you know, the impact that you felt your choices had on the final cut?
No, I mean, this sequence was such a joy to put together, and it was really fun for us to be collaborative with production and feel like our voices were heard. You know, it's fun to be a part of a show where you are entrusted with that, and they want to hear your opinion, you know, so it was really nice.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to move on to the music section and watch Darren's clip.
Man, that was beautiful. That was really fantastic.
Darren, that's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
I did a little research, so I was. It was interesting because you've done all the genres: mystery, thriller, docs, comedy, romance, kind of everything. This one is from The Silent Planet, which you did at a festival in Canada?
Yeah, so it premiered at Fantasia, actually, Montreal. And yeah, it's just doing the rounds now. So.
Oh, nice. Well, this scene in particular, the music carries the whole emotional arc. There's no dialogue.
Yeah.
And the sound is very kind of subtle and quiet, but it's beautiful. When did you get this scene? Like, in terms of, did the editors temp with anything, other music, and then give it to you, or what was that process?
They did temp with others. And to be quite honest, I can't remember exactly what it was temp with, right? But what's interesting is that when we were in when they were in pre-production, Jeff, the director, said, like, I really want this theme to kind of come across, and Naya, the main character, the woman in the scene there, she might be playing it on piano on like herself. So we needed this for when we're in production. And of course, I'd completely forgotten about this. And then I get a text from Jeff. I'm in Cannes, and he's like, "Dude, do you have that? We're shooting the scene somewhere." I was like, "Shit!" Right? And I end up I end up a little bit inebriated in my hotel room with a little small keyboard, kind of doing these things. But that theme there kind of comes out across beyond that, and what that really does, it kind of ties everything together, And so basically, once you have that sort of those thematic building blocks, it becomes a lot easier to kind of write through. This is actually, I think, the second or the third cue that I wrote. One of the big things I think about the scene, and the reason why it feels like forever until it cuts off, is when I had first given my first pass at it, I had the music going all the way until her face, right? And until you have that last shot there. And Jeff was like, no. I needed to be out by then, because I don't want the audience to feel like we're at peace, that she's at peace, with what's happening. She's still lost. She's still struggling. She's still trying to figure what the hell is going on, right? And that's just one of those kind of like little subtle things like that, and sort of what the back and forth are between, and there's some not subtle things too, that.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be one of my questions, like, what instrument did you start with first? So you did the piano first.
So I'm a piano player by trade, I guess. And as a composer, I generally start to just, it's sort of like, for a songwriter, maybe guitar, but for me, like, just coming up with ideas as with piano, and then I slowly built things out. We had one of the focal instruments, I guess, is the boy soprano, and that's actually a real live boy soprano that's there. And there's just something that's haunting, that's innocent about that. We have a pretend men's chorus of one that kind of goes, repeats. We record over him, and then we've got a real cello player and a real violin player, and I'm playing piano on that. So we kind of, what we do, that we stick it all together. I write it out. We go back and forth, and once we're locked, like in terms of the cues approved, then it goes through the process of whatever pre-records that we're going to have there, we bounce those out and we send them to all the players in their different locales. Like, I think the cello player was in London at the time. Our boy soprano was in Hermosa Beach, so that's not too exotic. The violin player was in Calgary, and I did the piano in. The male singer was in Edmonton, or in my hometown, and then I did the piano in my studio. So yeah. I'm sorry, I don't even know if I answered your question there. Blah, blah, blah.
I think for the audience, temp music, as editors, before the composer has a chance to get involved with you in the cut, we'll either use the composer's other music or other tracks, other soundtracks, whatever, to kind of lay the groundwork. And then we work with the composer, who will then compose to picture, or, it depends. Yeah. Like, sometimes on Only Murders, we'll get riffs or kind of themes in advance, and we'll start doing that. And then also, like, most of our stuff is recorded on MIDI, like, electronically in the composer's studio, and then re-recorded with live orchestra.
Indeed.
And that is a treat.
It is a treat, and we just quite frankly we ran out of time, and probably ran out of money too, which is probably a good thing because I got to keep more of the money for myself. But, I mean, the issue I think we're just so up to the wire in terms of just getting everything done, and if I had probably another like 3 or 4 more days, we could have got done the orchestral thing.
Yeah.
But just you sort of have to calculate back and think, okay, I need this much time to do this, and then it's got to go through all the processes of like, I have a team that helps me orchestrate. I can write out the parts and print out the parts, and we have to get the parts of the orchestra, then we got to record it, then we got to mix it, and we got to edit it. We have to do all of that. Whereas that if we're just doing with individual players doing their parts, we can just give it to them as they go along, and then we can kind of keep that perpetual ball rolling. But we can't really do that with an orchestra because it's so expensive to do.
Right. And so for this one, you did the crazy fast kind of piano theme, and then they used that on set for the actor?
They did use that on set, and oddly enough, that theme, the scene where she's playing that on piano actually gets cut, right? So that, but it still, is this kind of, it's become this focal point throughout the whole song.
It was beautiful. And then at one point in that sequence, you added the percussion and drums kind of in. Was that your choice or
That was
a note from the director?
That was actually a note from the director.
Yeah.
He had said like, I really want it to feel like, this is like this epic mountain thing, and I want drums. And it's interesting because that's the only time in the whole film the drums come in, right? So that was kind of like, okay, you're the boss. It's your film. But I think it works though, because I think it gives it a sense of finality in there, and it gives it a little bit of definition. But that last scene, the last cut there, where where Naya's just kind of staring into space and it's silent, just completely guts you in that like awkward silence,
Definitely.
that you have there. So.
Yeah. And you've worked with this director before, so you have a relationship.
We do. It's interesting. Jeff and I have worked together on every project that he's worked on, actually, since film school, right? So we have a relationship, and I'm the only key creative that he's had that with, which is really incredible. And he, so that's been, 18, 19 years, I think, which is, and I'm really not that old either. So.
You started when you were a baby.
You started when you were a baby.
But I think those relationships are interesting in the film industry because they're very common.
Absolutely.
And it's that space to be vulnerable and creative with each other, and your tastes usually align. It makes the process, I don't want to say easier, it's usually a little bit more fulfilling.
Yeah.
Because you're working with a collaborator.
Well, I think really what it boils down to is that, like, when you kind of knock down those barriers to communicating with it, like, that he's not being a douchebag by saying, like, and we've all had people, we've all worked with people who just go like, that's kind of an asshole thing to say. Like, did you really need to say it that way, right? But when it knocks down, when like that he's not trying to bring you down a notch, you're just working together to get the project better. It's kind of nice to be able to say, okay, like I see where you're coming from with your note. Let's kind of move forward with that. And just sometimes it's kind of getting over your own ego, I think, to just say like, hey, I get what he's trying to say.
So in addition to kind of starting the theme out early for the play, were you composing as you went along, as the film kind of evolved before its locked state? Like,
we try, so as much as we try not to compose to locked picture. I try to compose only to locked picture. Just because that you think you come up with this perfect melody, this perfect thing. It's like, oh yeah, we just took out a few frames here. We just took out a few frames. They're like, this perfect melody, and you got this kind of nice little phrase, and just you gotta take like one note out, right? And just like, But that being said, I think the reality of it is that we're, with technology and with just, and I think COVID has probably made things worse in the sense that we have the ability to turn things around on pivot really quickly. What happens is when you get really comfortable, when directors or producers get really comfortable asking for things because it's doable, we end up having to do it. And then it makes it like you don't get to spend the time in massaging it and like giving it the treatment that you want to, and instead you're always chasing that final, chasing that approval as just really making it to what it can be. So.
Well, are you happy with the final product?
I am.
Yeah.
I am. I think it's it's a beautiful film, right? It's a beautiful film, and it's not a music heavy film, but the scenes in which you do have music with, they're really powerful and they're really strong. And you kind of said that I've done all the genres here, and one of my big fortes, I think, is sort of the big epic orchestral thing, and this cue is sort of emblematic of what I do well, but the film is not all that, though. It's not these big sweeping, and a lot of them, we spent a lot of time, and even though Jeff is in Toronto and I'm in LA, we spent a lot of time sort of, with picture and source connect and like, synced audio and all that, and just kind of going like, nah, just move that a little bit over here, move that a little bit over there. And to your earlier point about just having that relationship with that, like, to someone who you don't have a relationship with, like, that may feel like micromanaging. But some of you have a relationship and you're really trying to look to just getting to that common place, that's like, okay, let's do this. Let's make this great.
And did you have interaction with the editing staff as well? Or?
So I think they didn't run out of money. But what happened is that Jeff ended up taking the editing sort of the last sort of way through. But I did some spotting with the editor as well. And it's always really great to have that sort of, that unaffiliated third set of eyes, right? To look at something and to say like, hey, help me understand this perspective, help me understand that perspective. I think the film changed a fair bit during, as feature films tend to do in the cutting stage. And it was just really interesting to see it from the rough cut and then see it really close to large copy, and just in terms of how much it was and like what were the motivations behind that. So,
And for the audience, spotting is like when we sit together with either the sound or the music department and we watch the picture or episode from beginning to end, start and stop, and talk about all the music choices or the sound choices. And so they get like a roadmap to what they're supposed to do in the next phases.
I think the interesting thing about spotting is music is one of the things that directors probably, unless you have a musically trained director, it's probably the thing that they know the least about. And I don't know how everyone else works, but I try to tell them not to think about it in musical terms, but to think of it in emotional terms. Let me think of the musical way to accomplish that. Now, if you really hate that oboe, great, let's get rid of the oboe. Like, what's that sound? Okay, we'll get rid of it, right? Yeah. But on the other hand, like, some people may have a different definition of what a beat is. Is that a dramatical beat? Is that a drum beat? Is that a drum loop? Is that the click track, right? So there are different. You want to encourage people not to use the terminology unless they're really, really sure what it is. And even then, you still don't want them to use it.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah. Most of us don't know the musical terms, and we don't, I don't know a bar from a measure.
They're the same thing, it's okay.
Nice, learned something today.
Well, I think you'd be surprised when you're in spotting or in mixes how people don't use the actual terminology, even maybe if they know it. They say, well, it needs to be more fuzzy or more orange or bigger or deeper or not, a double bass.
Yeah.
But it's funny, 'cause when I work with a mix engineer, like my joke to all my composing colleagues is that I can't mix my way out of a box. Like I just, what does this do? What does that do, right? But when I speak to a mix engineer, I go like, it sounds really cold here right now. Is there anything that we can do? And then someone would, okay, I'm going to EQ that, and this frequency to give it a little bit more the lower frequencies, whatever, right? But I try to let them come up with a solution, and I think that empowers everybody. And it gets you to the same place a lot faster, as opposed to trying to micromanage the process.
Right? I agree completely. So I look forward to working with you. Well, you'll have these conversations also, and you're not using terms. You might even be making noises, not the noise, but the noise. And I really enjoy that. And I think it's funny. I'll look around, and we're a bunch of grown professionals in this room making noise.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I do that a lot. Well, do you want to move on to the next clip, and we'll talk about sound?
I'm willing to struggle through the learning process, even change my approach just to figure out how to do it. I had never wanted to back down from a challenge. If you're convinced that you're going to fail, that will come to fruition. I was willing to get hurt along the way, but I didn't visualize myself getting hurt along the way. I always approached it like, this is going to work. I'm going to figure this out.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that was good in your clip, the sparse with something.
John, amazing. I had a couple of like immediate questions for you. You also had worked with the producers before.
Duplass Brothers,
The
yes.
Duplass Brothers, so you had a relationship. But also, as with Darren, you've worked in all genres. How do your sound choices differ from documentary versus narrative?
That's a good question. Narrative, of course, we're making it sort of hyper reality. Everything is, hyper real and bigger. And in documentaries, you don't want to do that too much because you want it to feel real, to seem real. The second you start to, make everything larger than life, it doesn't feel like a documentary. It doesn't feel real anymore. And that's not to say I don't like those sound jobs. I do. Mm-hmm. And when I started to do the mock-ups of this, I did start by saying, okay, we're going to big body falls here, and I'm going to take out the production sound and use these big skateboard sounds and whooshes and all of this. So I started to do it that way. What they wanted was we want to be in Tony's head. We want this to be painful. We want to feel the frustration. All just in his head. And that was difficult, just to think, okay, well, how do I do this with sound? They had cut in some music throughout, and that's what I got. I think I got a little ahead of your question. But so what I did was I put their music in, and I put these big sound effects in, and then I even on my own temped in my own music, just ideas to spitball with them. Working with the Duplass Brothers, they're great, and they give me a lot of leeway. And Greg Fenton, the picture editor, great picture editor, I worked with him before, and he gives you free rein. So I started doing this big sounds, music, big, impactful, emotional things, and they wanted it emotional. And then I kept thinking, this isn't it, this isn't it, this isn't it. And so I went, all right, I'm taking out all the sound effects. I'm just going to listen to production. I'm going to take out the music. Let's see what we've got. Let's put the production noise back in. And I thought, there it is, just, sparse. I'm a big fan of less is more. Not always, I'm a musician, not at his caliber, but less is more often, just like his clip. Wasn't that great, listening to just the music, sparse notes, sometimes less is more, not like what I'm doing right now, but just a few notes, and then the wind at the end of your clip, it's like, wow, that's just amazing. You feel alone, and it's a very emotional thing. So that's how I chose to just use the production sounds.
Did you present that to Greg and the Duplass Brothers and say, hey, like they had given it to you at first with all music, and then you experimented. You gave that back to them, and then you all found a middle ground, or how did that?
That's correct. And there were the big production sounds, the big hits, things like that. But once I pulled out the music, I realized that it was just a few sounds here and there. And I said, can I have an assembly, meaning all the sounds for all the shots? You know, you get this checkerboarded session. And either they didn't have sound for all the shots. So it was, when I listened back to the assembly, it was, you know, and I'm like, well, this isn't usable, unfortunately. I'm like, I kind of painted myself into a corner. So then I went through and looked at alternate takes, footage that wasn't used, grabbed little pieces of sound that, a lot of colorful language in there, and also then went and recorded my own sounds, because anything that was in the sound effects library was big and fat and, you know, just didn't work with this. None of my sounds did. So I went and took a skateboard and beat up a skateboard and recorded a lot of things with similar microphones, so it sounded similar. For those who don't know, ADR is dialogue that you put in later, but it's often hard to match dialogue that you record in the studio later like this, because it doesn't sound like it does on the set for many different reasons. But then a big trick in mixing is to make that sound like production, so it just fits in. So that's what I ended up doing for the sounds, because I found the sound that the biggest sounds have the most reverb on them. You hear them going, wow, in that big room, but then a lot of the other sounds didn't, you know, because they were either closer mic'd or I recorded them and they had no reverb on them. So I went through and had to match all of these other sounds. It's really a mosaic that you're seeing. Well, anything we do is a mosaic of sounds, but this was really a mosaic of 1,000 little sounds from either other production or maybe some sound effects in my library or things I recorded. Then I needed to add the same amount of reverb so it worked through the whole thing. Normally, if you have music, it covers up a lot of things. We call it a Band-Aid or whatever, and it does cover up a lot of mistakes or little bumps or things that don't match. But without that, everything just stood out on its own. So it actually took a long time to do that. You would look at this and say, oh, it just seems like production sound. You just, you know, shot it and that's what it is. Part of why I'm so proud of this is because that's not what it was. It was actually a lot of work.
I think what's so impressive, if you think about it, you know, and you're like, how is he getting that sound, right? Because you don't see microphones around, because in order to get such a pristine sound and to get that perspective, you'd really need to have like microphones all over the place and then be able to control it, but there's nothing there. So, you know, for the uninitiated, you're like, oh, wow, that, you know, and the fact that you don't notice it is really the biggest compliment, because you're so into it, right?
Thank you.
But then you just, you know, for the initiated, you go like, holy gee, like, wow, that's really incredible. So.
And I thought it worked when we were done. I was like, yeah, okay, this feels like you're in Tony's head. You get the frustration, you get the pain, you hear the skin on the wood and the booms. And there's a couple booms in there, but I tried to hide them because I didn't want it to be bombastic or seem unreal. And then the music comes in at the end, which is then it's more powerful. You know, I'm a big fan of dynamics. You know, just the whole show should be like a song. It should build, there should be some peaks, and then it should go, you know, the sound job should be like a song or a symphony. So let's start it out just bare bones. And then he comes in, he starts to talk, and it's like, ooh, dialogue, I like this. And then pull the sound effects out. So it's just going to be dialogue and music right now. And then you don't hear the sound effects, and that's a neat effect. You know, less is more, I think. You know, if you just had sound effects the whole way through, loses its impact. Just, you know, that from music and visual as well. You need to, you know, give the senses a break. Then it's just dialogue and music, and then maybe a little bit of sound effects back in when there's no dialogue. And
well, it was such a great job of drawing you into the story. You were right. You could feel the hits, you know, and then the wheels spinning. You're just like leaning in, mesmerized. Like, it was so great. And footsteps. Payton, Indiana, and I spend a lot of time on footsteps.
It's harder than you think. It's much harder than you think.
It's so hard. Sometimes time consuming. But I was obsessed with those footsteps. I was like, oh, those are perfect.
Thank you. That's me in my kitchen.
Yeah, I just think both of these clips have been phenomenal to watch, and I hope that everybody kind of got the idea that it is such a collaborative art. We're all depending on each other. You know, we're cutting picture and calling our sound department and our composer for help along the way, and it is very much, you know, we're all dependent on each other to take this, as they all say, the script is one thing, what they shoot is another, and what comes out of editing is the final product. And it goes through a lot of steps, a lot of variations, a lot of changes, but it is through that collaboration that we bring to you what you see on screen.